Hi everyone, my name is Birdie and I am here to talk to you about stage management. This is my first Zoom recording, so apologies in advance for any choppiness. And I'm sorry not to be able to do this in person and in real life. Like I said, I'm here to talk to you about stage management, so we'll get right to it. Number one, what is a stage manager and what do they do in the theater? So a stage manager is the person responsible for the technical details of a theatrical production, assisting the director during rehearsal, supervising the lighting, costuming, setting, prompting, etc., and assuming full responsibility for the stage during a performance of a play. So that is a lot of responsibility. I like to say that stage managers are the hub of communication in the rehearsal room, and once you get into the theater, you are the boss. You are in charge of everything. So I, in particular, am an equity stage manager, and that means I am a part of the union Actors Equity. Actors and stage managers are part of this union. So stage managers are responsible for upholding the rules of the union for the actors, keeping the actors safe, keeping ourselves safe, making sure nobody's taken advantage of in terms of our hours, and keeping everyone happy and healthy and safe in the room. There are two modes to putting a show up. The first, of course, is rehearsal. And during rehearsal, stage managers are in charge of, among other things, the daily schedule. We are in charge of tracking and notating the blocking or staging of the show, the props, the costumes. We are in charge of rehearsal reports. As I mentioned, we're the hub of communication. And daily reports go out at the end of the night telling all of the other departments what things were added, what needs to be done, anything that's broken and needs to be fixed. We'll talk more about reports specifically later. Once you get into performances, stage managers sort of split up into a couple of different roles. You have your deck stage manager. They're in charge of running the deck. So they're in charge of making sure the preset is correct every day. The props are all in the right places. The scenery is all where it needs to be. They're in charge of the run sheet, creating the document that tells everyone backstage what they need to be doing and when, and generally keeping the deck a safe and happy place for actors and crew alike. Then you have the calling stage manager. The calling stage manager is in charge of calling the show. If you don't know what that means, you'll see an example of it at the end of this presentation, but it is literally saying lights go, sound go, scenery go. Nothing in a show happens without the stage manager saying the word go. It's a lot of power. The calling stage manager, because we are watching the show every day, so we're in charge of the maintenance of the show and making sure the actors are standing where they're supposed to be, making sure the lights look like they're supposed to, and then again at the end of the night, we continue to send out a report letting everybody know what's happened during the day. Before we get into rehearsals, stage managers generally have a week or 2 weeks of pre-production. During pre-production, we are in charge of multiple things, such as sorry about that, apologies again. All right, so pre-production, we are working on setting up the rehearsal room. And one of the first things we'll do before we fill the room with tables and chairs for actors, directors, choreographers, etc., one of the first things we do is we get a ground plan of the show. This that you see on the screen is an example of a ground plan for Be More Chill, a musical that I worked on Broadway last year. And the ground plan is like the blueprint of what the set is going to be. And one of our jobs is to tape the blueprint of the stage onto the floor so that actors, director, choreographer knows where to stand, knows how to avoid things like these columns, and knows that the bed is going to track on and off on this line here. That's the line of the automation. And so all of this will be taped on the floor to let everyone know, have a blueprint of what the stage is actually going to look like. So in this particular instance, the choreographer asked that not only we tape out all of the physical pieces of the stage, where the front of the stage is, where the columns are, where the wings are, things like that. He asked that we also tape out the pattern on the floor, the paint job, so that he could use these lines of circuitry, which were painted on the floor, as part of the choreography. He could use those lines. So once we were done taping the floor, it looked like this. It was a lot of tape. It was a big job. We had a bunch of volunteers, student stage managers come in and help us. And in the end, we had a blueprint of the set taped out on the floor. Also in pre-production, this is a picture of a rehearsal room for a show I did at the Signature Theater called John. And it took place in a bed and breakfast. So in this instance, there's an upstairs in the show, and we had elderly people in the cast, and so it was very important to the director that we had a staircase in rehearsal so that we could time the folks who couldn't walk as quickly going up and down the stairs, so that we would know if, for instance, we needed to add more dialogue to allow more time to get them upstairs, something like that. So it's really important in the pre-production to make the rehearsal room look as much and feel as much like the actual set as possible. So we are in charge of requesting and organizing rehearsal props and furniture. You can see again on these tables, each department gets a table, pens, pencils, tissues, Ricola, hand sanitizer, more important than ever right now. All of these things fall under stage management's jurisdiction, keeping a happy, healthy rehearsal room. So pre-production's over. We have a beautiful looking rehearsal room. We have our taped out on the floor. Everybody's ready to go. We have scripts printed, et cetera, et cetera. We get to rehearsal. What are stage managers doing? Well, among other things, we are doing the daily schedule. And on any given day, the schedule may include music, choreography, dialect, fight rehearsals, fittings, wig fittings, shoe fittings, video shoots, audio recordings, press, designer run-throughs. There are a million things to coordinate, and it's generally the calling stage manager or the production stage manager's job to build the daily schedule. Sometimes the schedule is very simple. This was a one-man show, and so the schedule looked like starting at noon, and our one man in the show was called, and we did a work through of the show starting at 12:30, and then at 5 o'clock, that was the end of the day. And sometimes the schedule looks more like this. Much more complicated. As you can see, we're doing staging in one room with the director, and we have just the principals there. And in the other room, we're having staging with the choreographer, and it's the ensemble, and they're working on the song Along Came Bialy. But in the notes, you can see that the cops may be pulled out of working on Along Came Bialy to come and be in the staging room with the director for a little bit of time. J.T. Egan needs to know that at 12:30, he's leaving to go to a fitting. Someone else has a fitting at 3 o'clock, so his, pardon me, so his lunch may be staggered. We've also got down here multiple wig fittings all outside of the rehearsal area, so we need to make sure we're giving folks time before their fitting travel time in order for them to get there. So it's a lot of bits and pieces, and a schedule like this can take hours, can take all day to create. With lots of people's needs and trying to get everything slotted in as best you can. While the calling stage manager is dealing with that, the deck stage managers have started their tracking sheets. And among the things they'll be tracking are costumes, props, blocking, entrances, and exits. So that when we get to tech and the designers join us who haven't been in the rehearsal room as much and may not know, the crew definitely doesn't know the show, so we can be the ones to say, yes, that so-and-so is going to be entering from that side, so we need their costume change to be on that side. Or so-and-so enters with a cup, but then somebody else exits in the other direction holding that same cup, and then someone else has to enter holding it on the other side in the very next scene. So actually, it turns out we're going to need 2 of those cups that look identical, so that we need both. Things like that. Everyone has a different way of notating these things. There's no correct there's no correct paperwork. It's whatever works best for your mind. There are some things that are standard. This is my method of blocking. I like to, if you can see these little numbers here, there's a little 10 in the dialogue. To me, I'll have a slip sheet on the page next to it. And so number 10 says, oh, opens eyes and sits up. So I know that after a lecturer says, nothing is as bad as what you imagine, Orestes is going to open his eyes and sit up. Down here, 15, I won't let go of you. Electra crosses upstage of Orestes, kneels on the bench, and puts her arms around Orestes' chest. Now, as you can see, I write in a bit of a shorthand because as you're going through the show, It's quick, especially if you have a large cast. You don't have time to notate every little thing. So I work with a shorthand and symbols. So in the front of every blocking script that I create, I have a key that says what each symbol means. So this one has the characters written out. O is Orestes, E is Electra. Here are some of the symbols I use, like upstage of and downstage of, any set pieces. So this little trapezoid is a bench. And so you can see as you're translating, Electra crosses upstage of Orestes and kneels. Kneels looks like that, a K with a little down arrow on the bench, puts her arms around Orestes' chest. And the reason we need a key, because I use all the same symbols for every show I do. So for me, I can read that and know exactly what it says. But the point of all of these tracking sheets is that if any of us stage managers were to be hit by a bus, in theory, anybody else would be able to pick up our books and pick up where we left off and understand what's going on and be able to run the show, work the show. It's the theory of the show must go on. We try to make these things foolproof. So my key is a way to do that. And that's how I notate blocking. This is an example of a prop plot. So you can see what the thing is, what page it's on, what scene it's used in, if there's any collaboration between departments. So the silk handkerchief is a prop, but costumes is going to want to have a say, for instance, in what color it is. You can see who enters with it so that we know where it needs to be, and any notes, such as the typewriter has to be working and has to have a key that will stick in Act 2. So this, during the pre-production, we start a tracking sheet like this based on the script, and we give it to the props people so that they know what we're going to need for the rehearsal room. And then we continue to update this as rehearsals go on, so that once we get to the theater, we have exactly what we need. This is an example of costume tracking. So we can see, for instance, that Alan comes in barefoot for scene 1-4. So maybe we have to make sure with scenery that the hardwood floors aren't too rough, that they are sanded down, treated with a treatment to make sure that being barefoot is safe. Or we'll know things like, in this scene, he removes his jacket. So that means, hey, costume designers, A, he has to have a jacket in that scene, and B, it might get left on stage. So at the end of the night, when wardrobe is doing your cleanup, you have to know to go and retrieve that jacket. So lots of information come from the costume tracking sheets. Again, we start these in pre-production to give us an idea of what we think is going to happen, and then we continue to update it and pass it along to the costume department as rehearsals continue. This is a piece of paperwork that I love very much. This is from a production of The Producers, and I like this piece of paperwork specifically for stage managers because it has everything on it. So it tells you who the person is, where they're entering, upstage center, and then where they're exiting in left wing 1, what they're dressed as, a first nighter, that they have 2 minutes and 5 seconds to change for their next entrance, which thankfully is also on stage left, when they come in as a newspaper man. We know they enter carrying a program, and when they exit here, they're going to be striking 2 large stacks of newspapers and 2 medium stacks of newspapers. So we, in theory, can hold this one piece of paperwork backstage and direct all of the backstage traffic, tell everyone in the crew where they need to be and what they need to be doing. Costumes, this needs to happen over here, it needs to happen in this wing. Props, expect to have these newspaper stacks come off in this wing at this time and be ready to catch them, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a piece of paperwork which is mostly for stage managers and to make for themselves, but it's one that I particularly love and use all the time. Rehearsal reports. As I said, rehearsal reports are used to record notes before, during, and after a rehearsal and affects other production departments. These are the main basis of communication with other departments during the rehearsal process. So rehearsal reports are very important. And I'm going to show you an example now of what happens when a rehearsal report goes from, what happens when an item goes from rehearsal report all the way through production. So this is an example of a rehearsal report from the musical Be More Chill. You can see there's a section for every department, lots of notes under props today. So first you start off with general things. A productive day, we finished staging our giant opening number and moved on to Act 1, Scene 2. Stephen is really letting the actors play and build on our last production. So scenic. Will dry erase markers wash off the lockers? We'd like Rich to draw some graffiti, maybe a penis, on them during the opening number. So that goes out, as I said, to every department. This went out to about 150 people, and we got this as a response from the, oh, sorry, that's just the second page of it. So yeah, for every department, electric, sound, there were no notes, video, no notes, script changes were attached, et cetera, et cetera. This is the response we got to the question about the dry erase markers. From our scenic designer, graffiti. We tried out dry erase markers on the lockers at the shop. It wasn't successful. They sort of wipe off, but over time they'll leave a pretty bad mark. Sven, that's the props designer he's talking to. Could we either try washable markers for kids to write on the shower tile and or liquid chalk markers? I've never used either product, but both look like possibilities. Lindsay, the production manager, has a couple samples of the locker finish we brought back with us to test markers on. Lindsay, production manager, writes back to say, hi all, we'll plan on bringing the locker samples over to the rehearsal studio on Monday morning. Then the props designer chimes in to say, do you think black grease paint would work for the lockers? Like clown makeup from the costume store? Cardboard won't be forgiving to graffiti. Then the production manager writes back again to say, let's try it. I think that might actually work since I don't think it will react chemically with the enamel on the lockers. My other thought was China markers or grease pencils, which are made to be wipeable. And then the scenic designer wrote back again and says, possible to get all the options outlined so we can see what works best. Ideally, it'd look like it's a marker so it feels more like the character is defacing things. And then the director finally chimes in to say, y'all, thanks for taking this graffiti penis idea so seriously. So you can see how many people it requires to get a little thing done, just how many departments are involved and how everybody's working collaboratively to make the artistic vision happen. And then this is what it ended up looking like in production.
Oh, where's my homework?
So here he is drawing on the urinal. And as you can see, we unfortunately never were able to get it to, we were never able to get it to show up to be visible to the audience. So that ended up getting cut for Broadway. The whole idea that the graffiti entirely was cut for Broadway. So now we moved into performances, and in performances, what do stage managers do? Performance duties, we are still in charge of scheduling and communication, but now we add running the deck, maintaining the show, and calling the show to our list of duties. So deck stage managers, I talked about them a little bit earlier, but again, their main responsibilities are to check the props and scenery and make sure everything is there where it should be to start the show, and then to run the deck during the show. And that means being in charge of the crew and making sure everybody is where they're needed to be at all times. So that scenery gets moved, so that costume changes get done, so that actors make their entrances. Stage manager's job is to stand in the wings and make sure everything happens. We have various pieces of paperwork to help us do that. The first is a preset checklist. So it is literally a checklist that says where the props go, and every day we literally go through and check it off to make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be. And again, there's no standard list, there's no standard piece of paperwork. Everyone does it however it works best for their eyes. So same with run sheets. Run sheets are the piece of paper that tells the crew what to do. So it'll say, you know, Mark from props, make sure you're there stage left to catch this item, or Carpenter on stage right, you have to be there to move the lockers on stage, or whatever it may be. And here are a couple different examples of the way run sheets can look, because they can be really anything that you like. Some people like to do them with a lot of pictures. So this says, reset the TV props, strike the red scripts and music book, they're dead, they go away. move the LPs to the stage right side where they are here on the TV, with the Ames Brother LP on top, and then set the tray with the liquor and rocks glasses on the stage left side. So this stage manager, this is an example from Beautiful, the Carole King musical, has chosen to use pictures and sort of a Word document with various colors to highlight and show exactly who should be doing what. And again, the idea is that should this person get hit by a bus, anyone is able to pick up this piece of paperwork and make sure that the show runs smoothly. This is a completely different example, totally valid. This is from Be More Chill again, and this is a different kind of run sheet, which is based more on a grid, and it is a little more technical. It has to do, you can see the automation cues. We give their targets, and that has to do with their the programming of the computer to make sure they are landing and running exactly where they go. But again, there's some color coding. Props are blue, carpenters are red, and it just shows exactly where everybody needs to be and what they should be doing. This is a picture of Beautiful, the Carole King musical, a funny backstage story. So I subbed on this show for about 2 years, which meant I was there on and off, but with long periods of off in between. I would be gone for several months at a time to go off and do my own show, and then I would come back. You can see here the set is are these bridges, and they are split in the center, and they automate, they move from left to right. So they're sort of like these tunnels that go like this, and they track on and off. Well, back here in the wing, right behind where the tunnels track off is a doorway. And a carpenter noticed that the door wasn't working, and so it was sticking. So he opened the door and he was working on it to try to fix the hinges, and he walked away from it to go get a tool. Meanwhile, the bridges started to come off stage. And because I was a sub and I wasn't as used to the tracking of the show, I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't noticing that the giant bridges were about to track off stage. And unfortunately, the door was still like this. So this bridge tracked off and pushed the door open to the point where the hinges came off the hinges, it broke and came off the hinges, and we had to stop the show. So a good deck stage manager, which I was not that day, would have been watching and would have gotten on the headset and called hold and stopped the animation before the door broke off the hinges and the show had to stop. As it was, I sort of panicked. I'm not there all the time. I didn't feel the authority. But that is the whole purpose of the deck stage managers, to be there to keep the deck safe. So that is an example of me failing that day, but also why deck stage managers are really, really necessary to keep everyone safe and the show going smoothly. Maintenance is the next big part of a stage manager's job. During the run of the show, the director goes away, the designers go away, the stage manager is left in charge and is there to make sure that the piece always looks like it did on opening night, so that every audience comes in, even if it's after the 5,000th show, is getting the same show that the opening night audience did. So we maintain the show by having regular understudy and brush-up rehearsals. We also make sure any new understudy gets a put-in, which means they get to rehearse the show with all the regular actors, all the principal actors, from top to bottom, with their costumes, with the set moving, with everything, props, in order to get familiar with the show. And so the first time they go on in front of an audience, it's not their first time ever doing it. We are in charge of giving notes. Notes can be given to actors daily after every performance. We're watching the show. They can be simple technical things like you're standing too far to the left so you're not in the light, or they can be artistic, emotional notes such as, you know, I think you're holding back in this moment. You're not giving as much energy to your fellow actor, and so she's having trouble reaching her emotional breaking point if she's supposed to be crying in that scene. Things like that. Things like, hey, you know, you're not getting a laugh anymore there, and I think it's because you're taking too long you're taking an extra beat and you're taking too long, and it probably feels really good, but it means the audience gets ahead of you, and so they're not laughing as much at that line as they used to. So there's a lot of conversation amongst stage managers about whether or not we're artists. I don't really care. You can say we are or not, but I do think this is one way where we do show our artistry is in the way that we give notes and the way that we maintain a show and keep the artistic integrity really intact. Another big part of maintenance, technically and physically, are the performance reports that we do every night. So performance reports, again, can be, it's a general overview of how the day went. It goes out to every department, and oh, my apologies. Before I get to talking about that, this is a shift plot. This is used, this is particularly Broadway's Come From Away's shift plot, and they use this, we use this to rehearse understudies and for put-in rehearsals. It's a diagram of what every scene looks like. So this is the turntable used in the show, and then each of these little, that's a table, each of the numbers are chairs, and on the side here it says, oh, Katrina moves chair 9 to the gray top of show spikes. Or Chad Kimball moves chair 4 to the gray spike from right. And so again, this is just a way for any stage manager in the world to be able to pick this up and run a rehearsal and know what everybody is supposed to be doing. It's used for understudy rehearsals and for general maintenance. Performance reports. Depending on the performance, reports can be either very simple or very intricate. So an example of a very intricate one, back in the day, I did a production of Two Trains Running, and I loved that show, and we had a great time, and we had a great crew, and we had a great cast, and everything was great, but we had one really bad show. And so I wrote about it. I said, performance notes, a good house, good laughs throughout, and a particularly big reaction to $35,000. We had an eventful pre-show with things like not having enough ice in the building to fill our basin, the pie refusing to thaw despite having been left out overnight as usual, and the hot pot getting unplugged so that just before half hour we discovered the beans weren't cooked at all. We made an emergency run to several Mexican restaurants to find beans, but discovered they only had refried, which wouldn't look right, or pinto, which don't agree with Awiso, the actor. We got rice as a last resort and managed to open the house only a few minutes late. The actors masked the beans a little more than usual with their hands. We will of course make sure this never happens again. The show was decent tonight, but a little disappointing. I think Awoye, our assistant director, put it best when she said, it felt like just an ordinary day in the restaurant. Nothing extraordinary was going on. The actors were tired and frequently weren't really listening to each other. This resulted in some funny rhythms and a little bit of stepping on each other's lines. So this is a really good, accurate, detailed report. Everyone knows exactly what happened that day and exactly what's being done to address it and to fix it. Unfortunately, it also gave a little too much information. So the director read this and panicked and really felt like things were falling apart and called an emergency meeting early the next day because it was the only time he was available. So it was actually outside of allowed hours, but he called up each of the actors and said, you better show up at the theater. And then he sat us all down and had a true come to Jesus. He was furious. And the actors were outraged and they said to me, you know, what happened? And I had to say, it's my fault. It's because I wrote all of these things in the report. And I went to the artistic director of the company and I said, you know, it really wasn't that, I put those things in, I thought they were funny. I thought it was funny. And the show happened and the show was fine and it wasn't a big deal and everybody has an off night sometimes and it just wasn't really a big deal. And the artistic director said to me, well, keep that in mind, you know, people really read these things and what doesn't seem like a big deal to you, if you write it down like it's a big deal, may read as a big deal to somebody else. So from then on, my reports have looked a little more like this. General notes, an excellent show to end the week on. We had a fantastic audience, good energetic performance from the actors, and only minimal hearing aid feedback throughout the show. Full standing ovation for curtain call. The end. In addition to that, and being sensitive to keeping things professional and giving only as much information as maybe is needed, you can see on here that each of these reports have areas for technical notes for different departments. So again, this is, if something were to break, you would write it in here and the props people would know to fix it, etc., etc. Last piece of the performance, and one of the most fun, is calling the show. I think I mentioned this in the beginning, but literally nothing happens in a show unless the stage manager says the word go. Lights go, sound go, scenery go, flying go, automation go, it all comes from the stage manager. Nothing will happen. The music won't start. Truly, nothing will happen unless the stage manager says go. So calling is another place where, in theory, you could maybe call us artists. Designers, yes, give us the placement for each lighting cue or sound cue or whatever, but it's up to us to synthesize those perfectly so that they match with the music, so that they adjust to each actor, because the way an understudy does it is going to be different from the way a principal actor does it. And it's one of the things that I love most about the job. A really well called sequence is just so unbelievably satisfying. So call scripts look, again, there's no standard way, but this is what mine looks like. You have a line and a little hash mark where the cue is supposed to happen, and it'll say lights 85 or whatever it is. Sometimes it's a visual cue. So lights 84 happens with the down bow after the musical intro. Sometimes a lighting cue will happen on a musical beat. So in this case, right before my eyes, 2, 3, 4, go. And I have written to myself that it's a bump cue, which means a 0 count, an immediate cue, so that it's important that that one not be called early or late. Some lighting cues take a long time, or a sound cue can be gradual, and you have a little more wiggle room with those. A bump cue, you really have to do exactly. Be More Chill's call script, again, you can see I've written out dance counts. This is for the overture, so we know a lot of times fly rails, that's scenery that flies in and out, or automation cues are called on cue lights. So those operators are sitting at computers, and they'll have little colored lights, and they'll be watching those lights for their cues. So I'll give a verbal warning saying, warning, Autodeck 10 on the red, warning, rail cue 22 on the red and 24 on the blue. And so they'll know when the red light comes on to stand by for that, and when it goes off, that means go with rail cue 22, whatever you have previously decided during tech that rail cue 22 is. The first call script I showed you was for a very short show, so I just hand wrote it and called it a day. Be More Chill, because it was a long running show and because other stage managers had to come in and call the show, we made an electronic script that looks like this. So I am now going to give you, this was curtain call. So again, you can just see this is a bunch of visual cues. Lights 1917 is when everybody bows. Rail cue 97 is on these dance counts. And then the house lights coming on happens on the button of the music, which means the final note of the music. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of calling the show.
Hi again. Sorry, the last video didn't work. So I'm going to be showing you an example of calling a musical number from the musical Be More Chill. This is a number from the second act of the show. So as I'm calling the cues, you'll notice a couple of things. One, the lighting cues, the numbers are like 1275, 1301. That's because up until this point, there have been 1275 cues, or 1,300, however many cues. So this is a very busy show. It's a lot of fun to call. As I call the light cues, you should be able to watch for the lights to change. Some of the cues are faster or instant. We call those a bump cue. Some of the cues are a little more gradual. They might be in parts, like the light goes down on one side of the stage in 2 seconds and up on the other side of the stage in 4 seconds. For this particular show, the light console was also connected to the video feed. So all of the projections, when I call lighting cues, you might see projections happening as well. Since I'm at home, I don't have a cue light box here to show you the cue light system. I will also be calling the automation cues verbally as well, which I wouldn't normally do. You'll notice there's a little bit of a lag. I'll call an automation cue and the piece will take a few seconds to move in and out. That's because when I'm calling go, I'm actually talking to an automation operator on the headset, and it takes them a second to hit the button on the computer, and then it usually takes the computer a second or two to respond, and then the piece has to travel from off stage. So you'll see I'll call an automation cue and it'll be a little while before you actually see the piece arrive. I'm also calling Foy cues in this number, which is the company that does the flying. There's a little bit of flying in and out in this number. So You can see it's exactly like the script that I showed you in the video. These are the cues, and I'm literally reading through the script as we go and calling the cues as we get there. Sometimes the cues are called on a musical beat. So I'm counting in my head. Sometimes it's called off a lyric, and sometimes it's called off of a person moving. So it might be, you know, as the character crosses upstage, I call the cue so that the light is there for her upstage when she arrives. So enjoy. Flights 1267 and Autodeck 265. Go. Flights 1268. Go. Lights and animation. Go. Warning, Autodeck 267 on the red, 268 on the blue. Flight 1275. Go. Flight 1277. Go. Flights 1279. Go.
But do you want me to tell you? Spit it out, spit it out. You really want me to tell you? Spit it out, spit it out. I'll tell you, 'cause you are my closest friend. Oh, no. Yeah, I know.
Flights 1289. Go. Flights 1291. Go. Flights 1293. Go. Flights 1294. Go. Auto 267. Go. Lights 1295. Go. Autodeck 268. Go. Flights 1299. Go. Flight 1301. Go. Warning, Autodeck 270 on the red. Warning, Foy 220 on the red.
Between us ever again, okay? Smiley face, lipstick, kitty paw. Hey, we cool? We are. Okay, so at the end of last night's party,
Flight 1311. Go. Flight 1313. Go. Flight 1315. Go. Flight 1321. Go. Flight 1325. Go. Flight 1327. Go. Flight 1331. Go. Automation 270. Go. Light. Go. Flight 1335. Go. Flight 37. Go. Light. Go. Light. Go. Light 1343. Go. Flight 1345 and Foy 220.
sorry guys, it's just my autocorrect.
Go. Flight 1347. Go. Flight 1349. Go. Flight 1351. Go. Flight 1353. Go. Flight 1355 and Foy out. Go. Light. Go. Light. Go. Light. Go. Light. Go. Flight 1367. Go. Flight 1369. Go. Warning, auto deck 275 on the red. Flight 1379. Go, light, go. Flight 1385. Go. Flight 1387. Go. Flight 1389. Go. Flight 1395. Go. Flight 1399. Go. Flight 1409. Go. Flight 1415. Go. Flight 1417. Go. Flight 1419. Go. Light. Go. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much for watching.